This is the Holy Land Timeline, bringing the Bible to life from the Holy Land.
Walking the ground where history meets faith. You're listening to the Holy Land Path on the Holy Land Timeline. Here are your hosts, Ethan and Sarah.
Imagine the blinding midday sun reflecting off the Mediterranean Sea.
Okay, setting the scene. I like it.
Right. So you are standing in this massive Roman-style amphitheater in the coastal city of Caesarea.
Oh, wow.
And stepping out onto the raised platform is King Herod Agrippa I. But he is not wearing standard royal purple.
Definitely not.
No. According to the ancient historian Josephus, Herod is draped in this garment woven entirely out of pure silver thread.
Just pure silver. That is wild to even picture.
I know, right? So the moment the sun hits him, the glare is so intense, so terrifyingly brilliant, that the desperate, starving crowds below actually have to shield their eyes.
Yeah, it was blinding.
And then, needing his political favor to basically secure their food supply, they begin to shout this deeply blasphemous chant. They yell, "This is the voice of a god and not of a man."
The ultimate ego trip.
It really is. Yeah. It is the absolute pinnacle of human arrogance, wealth, and political dominance.
Yeah.
And yet, within 5 days, that same shimmering god will be dead.
Yeah, eaten from the inside out by worms.
Exactly. Eaten by worms, while the humble church he tried to destroy just continues to multiply.
It is such a dramatic turning point in the history of the early church.
It really is. Welcome back to the Holy Land Path.
Glad to be back.
We are continuing our special ongoing series on the apostles of the New Testament. Today is episode 3 of the series, where we follow the footprints of the early apostles out into the Greco-Roman world.
And we have so much to cover today.
We really do. We are taking a deep dive into an incredible intersection of history, archaeology, and scripture found right in Acts chapter 12.
Yeah, this is where all those worlds just collide.
They completely collide. We are examining the intersecting lives of King Herod Agrippa I, the Apostle Peter, and a really fascinating, sometimes confusing web involving the 3 men named James in the early church.
The 3 Jameses. That always trips people up.
It really does. But to sort it all out, we have quite a stack of sources on the table for you today.
Oh, definitely. We've got scriptural texts, obviously.
Right, like Acts, Mark, and Hebrews. But also historical accounts from ancient writers like Josephus and even the Roman philosopher Seneca.
Which is amazing to have that secular corroboration.
Yeah. Plus, we've got incredible archaeological records from the Temple Mount Sifting Project and ancient Christian texts from Eusebius, Hegesippus, and, well, even the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Right. But before we start turning over all these ancient stones today, I really want to establish a foundational rule for this deep dive.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
So, as believers who are passionate about biblical archaeology and, the historical roots of our faith, we must always exercise scholarly caution.
Yeah, that is so important.
It is.
Yeah.
Because there's often this temptation in our circles to sort of over-interpret an archaeological artifact.
Oh, definitely. Like forcing a square peg into a round hole.
Exactly. Or, stretching a historical text simply to fit a preconceived theological agenda, or frankly, to just drive Holy Land tourism.
Right, the shiny tourist brochure version of history.
Yeah, and we have to resist that. True evangelical faith values honest, rigorous, uncompromising historical context.
I couldn't agree more.
We do not need to invent history or embellish facts to prove the Bible is true. The real, unembellished stones, the ancient secular texts, the actual dirt of the Holy Land, they speak powerfully enough on their own.
They really do.
When we look at the real history, our faith is grounded in a reality that stands up to the most intense secular scrutiny.
That is such a vital framework for you, our listener, to keep in mind. We want the truth of the history. And the actual history sets up this central tension that I want you to just carry with you through this entire conversation.
It's a huge tension.
It is. How did this incredibly small, persecuted group of believers, mostly Galilean commoners, right?
Yeah, fishermen, regular folks.
Right. Armed with absolutely nothing but communal prayer in a living room. How did they manage to survive and outlast the crushing, wealthy, and violently lethal political machinery of the Herodian dynasty?
It makes no logical sense from a secular perspective.
None at all. But to understand the political and spiritual power the apostles were up against, we first have to really grasp the sheer physical dominance of the world they walked through every single day.
We really do. I mean, It is nearly impossible to comprehend the courage of the early church without first understanding the intimidating, overwhelming shadow that was cast by the Herodian temple in Jerusalem.
Oh, yeah, it was a monster of a building.
A literal marvel. We are talking about the architectural legacy of Herod the Great. Now, he was the grandfather of the Herod Agrippa I, whom we will discuss from Acts 12 later on.
Right, keeping the Herod straight is half the battle.
It really is. But Herod the Great embarked on this building campaign that absolutely staggered the ancient world.
He was a builder, for sure.
Obsessive builder. And to create a platform large enough for his grand vision of the temple, he actually doubled the size of the existing Temple Mount.
Wait, let me just stop you there, because saying he doubled the size sounds like a simple, home renovation.
Right, like adding a patio.
Exactly. But Mount Moriah, where the temple sat, is a literal mountain with steep sloping sides. How do you double the footprint of a mountain peak in the 1st century?
You do it through an engineering feat that still baffles modern architects today.
It's just wild.
It really is. His engineers built massive retaining walls and, the famous Western Wall that people pray at today.
Yeah.
That is just one exposed section of this massive box they built around the mountain.
Just a tiny piece of it.
Exactly. They filled in the gaps with dirt and constructed these massive underground vaults, which later became known as Solomon's Stable.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they did all this just to create a level, flat surface on top. This created the largest sacred compound anywhere in the entire Roman Empire.
The largest in the empire. That is saying something.
It was roughly 35 acres of flat paved space, and the temple sanctuary itself, it stood 70 meters high above that platform.
70 meters. So for those of you trying to picture that, that is roughly equivalent to a 20-story modern skyscraper.
Just towering over everything.
Imagine being a 1st century pilgrim from a tiny fishing village up in Galilee, where the biggest building is like a 1-story stone synagogue.
Right.
You walk up the ascent to Jerusalem, and you see a 20-story structure dominating the skyline. It must have looked totally otherworldly.
And it was designed to look exactly that way. The historian Josephus tells us it was heavily adorned with massive plates of gold.
Wow. Just plates of gold.
Plates of gold. But the architectural details underneath the gold are what really show the opulence. The walls were constructed using alternating blocks of white and green marble.
White and green marble.
Yes. The architects specifically designed it so that when the sun hit the sanctuary, it looked like a mountain covered in snow, or, like crashing ocean waves.
That is poetic. And we know this isn't just an ancient historian prone to exaggeration, right?
Right, because Josephus can sometimes exaggerate number.
Exactly. But you mentioned we have specific archaeological evidence confirming this level of luxury.
We do. Over the past couple of decades, there's been this amazing project called the Temple Mount Sifting Project.
Oh, I've heard of this. It's fascinating.
It really is. They literally sift through tons of earth that was illegally excavated and dumped from the Temple Mount, and they have managed to recover and reconstruct actual Herodian floor tiles from the temple courts.
Are these the opus sectile floors? Because I remember reading about how incredibly expensive those were to produce.
That's right. Opus sectile. It basically translates to cut work.
Okay.
So unlike a standard mosaic made of tiny uniform square pebbles, opus sectile used large custom-cut slabs of imported wildly colorful marble and stone.
So they weren't just local rocks.
Not at all. They were cut into these intricate geometric shapes, triangles, squares, octagons that fit together perfectly. They imported stones from Rome, Asia Minor, and Egypt just to walk on them.
Just for the floors.
Yes. The ancient Jewish sages, who, by the way, were not always fans of Herod.
To put it mildly.
Right. But they actually had a famous saying recorded in the Talmud. They said, "He who has not seen Herod's building has never seen a beautiful building."
That paints an incredible picture of the physical reality of the city. But, an imposing physical structure requires an equally imposing socio-political machine to keep it running.
Exactly the connection we need to make here.
Because to pull off a building project of that magnitude, Herod the Great had to demolish the older, beloved Hasmonean temple.
Right, which was a huge political risk.
Exactly. You cannot just tear down the center of Jewish worship without the backing of the religious authorities.
No, you'd have a revolt on your hands immediately.
So Herod forged this deeply complicated, incredibly lucrative alliance with the Sadducee high priests.
The elite families.
Right. These are families like Annas and Caiaphas, whom we read about orchestrating the trials of Jesus in the Gospels.
So if we translate this into a modern analogy, it sounds a lot like a massive corporate monopoly.
Well, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. If the temple is the central bank and the ultimate center of commerce for the entire nation, then the Sadducees are essentially the board of directors.
Yeah. They hold the exclusive permits for religious sacrifices, they control the temple tax, they run the money-changing tables.
Highly profitable.
Extremely. And Herod is essentially the CEO appointed by a hostile foreign power, Rome, to keep the whole monopoly generating revenue and keeping the peace.
That is a very accurate way to view the power dynamics at the very top. But while the Sadducees and the Herodians sat up in the boardroom, first century Jewish society was fracturing underneath them.
The pressure was building.
Exactly. The Sadducees controlled the temple, but because they largely rejected the supernatural, they didn't believe in angels or the resurrection of the dead, they were heavily focused on maintaining their earthly wealth and political status.
Very practical, very worldly.
Yes. And because of this corruption, you had a massive societal backlash.
Which is where the other groups we always hear about come into play.
Precisely. You had the Pharisees, who completely rejected the elite temple culture and focused on strict observance of the law in the local synagogues.
Which made them very popular with the common people.
Very popular. Then you had the Essenes, who were so disgusted by the corruption of the Sadducee priesthood that they abandoned Jerusalem entirely.
Right, they just packed up and left.
Yeah, they moved out into the desert at Qumran, lived in extreme purity, and, well, I wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Wow.
And then you also had the Zealots, who believed the only solution to this corrupt alliance was to sharpen their swords and launch a violent, bloody revolution against Rome.
So society was just buckling under this extreme sectarian competition. Everyone was fighting for influence.
Total powder keg.
When you lay it out like that, you see this incredibly tense, wealthy, deeply entrenched political and religious monopoly. And into this absolute powder keg of power players walks a small group of Galilean fishermen who genuinely believe they're about to inherit the kingdom of God.
Yeah. And that context perfectly explains why Jesus' disciples were so confused about what power actually meant.
Oh, completely.
And what the kingdom was supposed to look like. When you live your entire life in the shadow of a 20-story marble and gold fortress, your brain naturally assumes that the kingdom of God is going to look like a bigger, better, holier version of that.
Right. A physical kingdom.
Exactly. They expected a political and military revolution that would kick out the Herods, kick out the Romans, and replace them with a restored Davidic throne in Jerusalem.
Which completely reframes that famous request made by James and John in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10.
Oh, yes, the sons of thunder.
Yes. These two are brothers, the sons of Zebedee. Jesus actually nicknamed them the sons of thunder, which tells you a lot about their fiery personalities.
They're intense.
Very. So in Mark 10, they pull Jesus aside and say, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask."
Such a bold approach.
Right. And their request is to sit at his right and left hand in his glory. We often read that as just naive arrogance, but in their minds, they are asking to be the vice presidents of this incoming political administration.
If we view their request through a social scientific lens, it is highly logical within their cultural context.
Really? How so?
Well, in the first century Mediterranean world, you did not advance in life through individual merit or a polished resume or climbing a corporate ladder like we do today.
Okay.
The foundational social structures were kinship your blood, family, and politics, specifically something called the patron-client system.
Break down that patron-client system for us, because that is so foreign to how we operate today in the West. How did patronage actually work?
So in the Roman world, society operated on this intricate web of favors and loyalty. If you were a commoner, a client, you would attach yourself to a wealthy, powerful patron.
Okay, like a sponsor.
Kind of. Every morning, clients would literally line up outside their patron's house in a ritual called the salutatio.
Wow, every morning.
Every single morning. The patron would give them food, maybe legal protection, or political appointments. In return, the clients gave the patron their absolute public loyalty, voted for him, and enhanced his social honor.
Oh, so it was very transactional.
Highly transactional. So James and John were operating purely on ancient networking principles. They believed Jesus was about to become the ultimate patron, the true king.
Right. They saw a power vacuum coming.
Exactly. And they were trying to lock in their cabinet positions before the other 10 disciples could.
They were playing the only game they knew. They thought, hey, If Herod can rule from a golden throne with the backing of Rome, we will rule from a better throne with the backing of the Messiah.
Yep, that was the mindset.
But Jesus completely stops them in their tracks.
Yeah.
He radically redefines the rules of the game right in front of them.
He dismantles their entire worldview in one conversation. Jesus tells them, "You know that those who are recognized as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them, but it shall not be so among you."
Not so among you. That's a strong statement.
It is. He says, "But whoever would be great among you must be your servant." He draws a profound contrast here. Worldly rulers, like the Herods, like the Roman governors, they exercise lordship.
Domination.
Exactly. Their power is based on domination, coercion, and wealth. But true discipleship, as Jesus defines it, requires becoming a slave to all.
That is a staggering paradigm shift for them. He is essentially telling them that discipleship is not a networking tool to get ahead in society.
Exactly. Discipleship in the Gospel of Mark is not merely checking off a list of theological propositions so you can eventually go to heaven.
Right.
It is a life praxis. It is a lived solidarity with the outcasts, the poor, and the marginalized. It requires absolute self-denial. And most importantly for James and John, it requires a willingness to share in Christ's suffering.
I think this is a perfect moment to bring this directly to you, the listener. It begs a really uncomfortable, searching question for the modern believer.
It really does.
How often do we treat our faith as a spiritualized patron-client system?
Oh, wow. That is a tough question.
Right. How often do we use our religion as a way to gain a secure, respectable position in our culture, or to guarantee our own comfort and prosperity, rather than accepting it as an invitation to selfless sacrificial service?
That cuts deep.
It does. Jesus responds to James and John by asking them a very pointed question. He asks, "Can you drink the cup that I drink?"
And they enthusiastically say, "We are able."
Without hesitation.
Right, but they have absolutely no idea what that cup actually holds.
They probably thought the cup was a jeweled chalice at a royal coronation banquet.
They absolutely did, but in the Old Testament prophets, the cup is frequently a metaphor for the wrath of God and intense suffering.
Oh, man.
It was a cup of suffering that Jesus would soon drink in Gethsemane and on the cross. And, well, about a decade after this conversation, James, the son of Zebedee, found out exactly what drinking that cup entailed.
That leads us directly into the historical drama of Acts chapter 12. But before we get to the martyrdom of James, I have to admit something. As a reader of the New Testament, I constantly get confused by the men named James.
You are definitely not alone in that.
There are just multiple Jameses floating around the early church. And if you don't know who is who, the narrative of the book of Acts can become incredibly tangled.
It is one of the most common points of confusion for readers of the Bible, and for very good reason.
Glad it's not just me.
No, not at all. You see, the name James in English is actually a translation of the Greek name Iakobos, which is the Hebrew name Jacob.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
And Jacob was an incredibly common name in first century Judea. There are 3 prominent figures named James in the New Testament that we need to clearly distinguish today.
Okay, let's lay them out. Who is the first one?
First, you have James the Greater. This is the man we were just discussing.
No.
He is the son of Zebedee, the brother of the Apostle John, and one of those sons of thunder. He was part of Jesus's absolute inner circle. Whenever Jesus took only 3 disciples into a significant private moment, like witnessing the raising of Jairus' daughter from the dead, seeing the glory of the transfiguration on the mountain, or praying in the agony of the Garden of Gethsemane, it was always Peter, James the Greater, and John.
Okay, so he is top-tier leadership. Who is the second?
Second, you have James the Lesser.
The lesser.
Right. He is identified in the Gospel lists as the son of Alphaeus. He is also one of the original 12 apostles, but we honestly know very little about him from the scriptural text compared to the son of Zebedee.
Why the lesser, then?
The title the Lesser might refer to him being younger or maybe shorter in stature, just as a way to distinguish him in the group.
It makes sense. And the third? Because this is the one who really shapes the later history of the church.
Yes. The third is James the Just. This man is the biological half-brother of Jesus, the son of Mary and Joseph.
Okay, the brother of Jesus.
Interestingly, the Gospels tell us that during Jesus' earthly ministry, his brothers did not believe in him.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it wasn't until after the resurrection that James the Just believed. But once he did, he rose to become the primary authoritative leader of the church in Jerusalem.
Okay, so keeping those 3 straight is crucial. The James we were talking about at the beginning of Acts 12 is James the Greater, the son of thunder, the one who asked for the throne.
Correct.
And this is where the political machine we described earlier re-enters the story. The current ruler is King Herod Agrippa I, reigning over Judea from roughly 37 to 44 AD.
And he is ruthless.
Right. Agrippa wants to solidify his power base, and the easiest way to do that is to please the Sadducee board of directors, the Jewish elites, who view this new Christian movement as a deeply destabilizing threat to their monopoly.
Exactly. Politics as usual.
So Herod targets the leadership of the early church. Around 42 or 43 AD, he arrests James the Greater and has him executed.
And the text specifically notes that James was killed by the sword.
Which means what exactly in that context?
Well, in the Roman legal system, execution by the sword typically meant beheading, which was actually considered a more honorable death reserved for Roman citizens or figures of certain status.
As opposed to crucifixion.
Exactly, as opposed to crucifixion, which was mostly for slaves and rebels. But regardless of the method, the impact on the church was seismic. James the Greater becomes the very first of the original apostles to be martyred.
It's a devastating moment. The reality of Jesus' words about drinking the cup suddenly shifts from a theological metaphor to brutal, bloody reality.
It got very real, very fast.
The political machinery of Herod has drawn blood from the absolute inner circle of Jesus' friends.
And yet, history tells us that this brutal execution did not silence the legacy of James. In fact, it propelled it to the ends of the earth.
Yes, there is a fascinating historical and cultural footprint left by this event. According to ancient church tradition, the physical remains of James the Greater were divided and venerated in completely different parts of the world.
It's quite a journey.
It is. His severed head is said to be buried right there in Jerusalem. If you go to the Armenian Quarter today, you can visit the St. James Cathedral. And there is a specific dimly lit chapel on the north wall where tradition says his head is interred.
Right. But the tradition surrounding the rest of his body is what created a global phenomenon.
Exactly. Tradition holds that after his beheading, his followers smuggled his body out of Jerusalem, put it on a boat, and transported it all the way to the Iberian Peninsula, modern-day Spain.
All the way to Spain.
Yeah. The site where his body was reportedly buried became known as Santiago de Compostela. Santiago is essentially an evolution of Santiago or St. James.
Oh, that makes sense.
In the Middle Ages, that burial site became one of the most famous and heavily traveled Christian pilgrimage routes in the world, known as the Camino de Santiago, or the Way of St. James.
People still walk it today.
They do, thousands of them. Because of this massive cultural influence, James the Greater is recognized today as the patron saint of Spain. And one of those strange quirks of history, because the Spanish military later invoked his name while fighting on horseback, he also became the patron saint of veterinarians and equestrians.
It is a remarkable, sprawling legacy for a Galilean fisherman who once thought political power was the only way to leave a mark on the world.
Yeah, God had a much different plan for his legacy.
He certainly did. But back in first century Jerusalem, the execution of James was not viewed as the start of a pilgrimage. It was viewed by Herod as a massive, calculated political win.
A huge win for his administration.
Right. The book of Acts notes that when Herod saw that the execution of James deeply pleased the Jewish leaders, he immediately escalated his campaign. He sets his sights on the ultimate prize. He goes after Peter, the recognized spokesman of the apostles.
And when Herod arrests Peter, he does not just put him in a normal holding cell. Because Peter and the apostles had a history of mysteriously walking out of prisons earlier in the book of Acts.
Yes, Herod was well aware of their track record.
Right. So Herod treats him like an ancient, high-value terrorist. He throws Peter into a maximum security situation that frankly defies belief.
And the timing of the arrest is a critical detail here. Acts tells us Peter was arrested during the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Okay, set the scene for us there.
So this is the 7-day festival immediately following Passover, a time when all leaven is cleared from Jewish homes to commemorate the Exodus from Egypt. Now, Jerusalem during Passover and unleavened bread swelled to hundreds of thousands of pilgrims.
The population basically quadrupled, right?
Easily. The city was an absolute tinderbox of religious fervor and nationalist sentiment against Rome. Herod Agrippa, being a shrewd politician, knew that holding a highly publicized, bloody execution of a popular figure like Peter during a sacred festival could trigger a massive riot.
Yeah, that would be terrible PR.
Exactly. Furthermore, the Sadducees would not want the ritual purity of the festival defiled by a public execution. So, Herod decides to hold Peter in custody and plans to bring him out for a public trial and execution after the feast concludes.
So Peter is basically on death row. and Herod takes zero chances with his security. The text says Peter is placed under the guard of 4 squads of 4 soldiers each.
That is 16 elite Roman or Herodian soldiers dedicated solely to guarding one unarmed fisherman.
Talk about overkill.
Seriously, they would rotate in shifts through the night to ensure the guards were always fully awake and alert.
But the physical setup of the cell is what makes this truly impossible. Peter isn't just locked behind an iron door. He is sleeping chained directly to the bodies of the guards.
Yes, and this is where our external historical sources align beautifully with the scriptural account, giving us a very grim picture of reality.
What do the sources say?
Well, the Roman philosopher Seneca, as well as Josephus, both describe this specific extreme method of securing high-value prisoners in the Roman penal system. It was designed for maximum psychological and physical control.
Okay.
The prisoner's right wrist would be bound with a heavy iron chain to a guard's left wrist, and his left wrist would be chained to a second guard's right wrist.
So he is literally sandwiched between 2 armed men.
Exactly.
If Peter sneezes, if he shifts his weight, if he even rolls over in his sleep, he drags heavy iron chains across the wrists of 2 trained killers, waking them instantly.
Escape was not just unlikely, it was physically, logically, and humanly impossible.
You have the full, terrifying weight of the Roman and Herodian military apparatus crushing down on Peter, 16 guards, heavy iron chains, reinforced prison doors, and massive iron city gates standing between him and freedom.
Which brings us to one of the most profound contrasts in the entire New Testament.
Oh, I love this part.
When we look at this situation, what is the early church doing in response to this overwhelming display of state power? Are they forming a militia?
Nope.
Are they plotting a violent jailbreak? Are they pooling their money to bribe the guards or the judges?
Not at all.
No. The text tells us they are gathered at a house in the city, engaged in fervent, unceasing communal prayer.
We cannot miss the deliberate theological connection the author Luke is making here. We are meant to explore this connection between communal prayer and the power of the apostle in prison.
It's the central point of the narrative.
Right. The narrative structure explicitly links the church's desperate, unified communal prayer in a humble living room directly to the arrival of supernatural power in the maximum security prison cell.
Yeah.
The power that breaks Peter out does not originate from his own strength or from some backroom political leverage. It originates from the knees of the believers praying across the city.
It is the ultimate showdown. You have Rome's heavy iron chains in one corner and the church's unified prayers in the other.
And the prayers win.
The prayers win.
The text describes this incredibly cinematic sequence. A light suddenly shines in the dark, windowless cell. The angel of the Lord appears, taps Peter on the side to wake him up, and simply tells him to get up and get dressed.
Just, hey, get up.
Yeah. And as Peter stands up, the heavy iron chains simply fall off his wrists. There is no struggle, no sound of breaking metal to wake the guards. The chains just drop.
The angel leads Peter right past the first guard post. Then they walk past the second guard post. Finally, they reach the massive, heavy iron gate that leads out into the city streets.
The final obstacle.
Right. And the text says the gate simply opened for them of its own accord. The Greek word there is automate, from which we get our word automatic.
Wow.
Yeah, the iron gates of the Herodian machine literally yield to the spiritual authority of the angel.
Peter is in such a state of shock that he thinks he is having a prophetic vision. He assumes he's dreaming all this.
I mean, who wouldn't?
Right. It isn't until the angel leads him down one street and then suddenly vanishes, leaving him standing alone in a dark alley, that the cold night air hits him and he realizes, oh wow, I am actually awake. I am actually free.
It is a miraculous, awe-inspiring deliverance. But what makes the book of Acts so brilliantly authentic is how the narrative immediately pivots from this high-stakes, supernatural rescue to a moment of genuine, almost slapstick, human comedy.
I absolutely love this part of the story. It is so deeply relatable and human.
It really is.
So Peter gets his bearings, sneaks through the dark streets of Jerusalem, and goes to the house of Mary. Now, this Mary is specifically identified as the mother of John Mark, the young man who would later go on to write the Gospel of Mark.
Right, a very prominent household.
Peter goes to the outer gate of her courtyard and knocks. Inside, a servant girl named Rhoda hears the knock and comes to the gate. She asks who is there, hears Peter's voice through the heavy wood, and recognizes him.
And her reaction is priceless.
It really is. She gets so overwhelmingly excited and overjoyed that she completely forgets to actually open the gate.
She just leaves him there.
Yes. She leaves the most wanted, highly sought-after fugitive in all of Jerusalem standing outside in the street, exposed to any passing night patrols, while she runs back inside the house to announce to the prayer meeting that Peter is at the door.
The irony here is so thick you could cut it with a knife.
Oh, completely.
This entire congregation is gathered, staying up late into the night, fervently weeping and praying for God to deliver Peter from prison. But when the literal answer to their prayer is knocking on their front gate, their theology cannot handle the reality. They refuse to believe it.
They tell Rhoda, "You are out of your mind." But she keeps insisting that she heard his voice. So they come to the only logical conclusion that fits their worldview. They say it is his angel.
Right. It can't be Peter in the flesh. The Romans have him locked down too tight. It must be his guardian angel.
Which is such a weird conclusion to jump to for us today.
It is. But while this is a humorous moment of doubt, it provides us with a fascinating window into the theology of first-century Judaism and early Christianity.
How so? What does their reaction tell us about what they believed?
The fact that their immediate default assumption was that Peter's personal angel had come to the door reveals a very robust, highly developed theology regarding guardian angels.
Okay.
They believed that angels could actually take on the physical voice and appearance of the person they were assigned to protect. And we know this wasn't an isolated belief. We see this exact same intense, highly developed angelic theology in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
The text written by the Essenes out of Qumran?
Exactly. The Essene community wrote extensively about angels. They believed angels actively participated in their communal worship, fought alongside them in spiritual warfare, and frequently interacted with the human realm.
Wow, so it was a very active spiritual worldview.
Very active. The early Christians, living in this same first-century Jewish milieu, shared this deep, profound conviction that the spiritual realm was not some distant abstraction. It was actively, constantly intervening in their daily physical lives.
So while the church is inside having this high-level theological debate about angelology, Peter is still outside, just pounding on the door.
Probably looking over his shoulder every 2 seconds.
Exactly. Finally, they come to their senses, open the gate, see him in the flesh, and they are completely astounded. The text says Peter has to motion to them with his hand to quiet them down so they don't wake the neighbors and alert the authorities.
Shushing the whole church.
Yeah. He quickly tells them the incredible story of how the Lord brought him out of the prison. But Peter knows he cannot stay. At daybreak, the Romans will realize he is gone, and a massive manhunt will tear through the city.
And before Peter flees into hiding, many scholars believe he headed up to Antioch, or perhaps temporarily out of Herod's jurisdiction entirely. He gives the group one very specific instruction. He says, "Report these things to James and to the brothers."
Wait, I need to stop you there. I am looking at the timeline we just laid out. Peter says, "Go tell James." But didn't we just establish at the very beginning of this chapter that King Herod Agrippa had James executed with a sword? How can they report this to a dead man?
And this is exactly why we had to lay out our list of the three Jameses earlier.
Okay.
This is where the transition of leadership happens. The James who was martyred by the sword was James the Greater, the son of Zebedee. The James that Peter is referring to here in Mary's house is James the Just, the half-brother of Jesus.
Got it. So with James the Greater dead and Peter forced to go on the run and operate basically underground, a massive leadership vacuum opens up in the Jerusalem church.
Precisely. And it is James the Just who steps into that void to assume ultimate pastoral leadership of the mother church in Jerusalem. He becomes the central pillar.
The main guy.
Right. We see him firmly in charge later on in Acts chapter 15 at the momentous Jerusalem Council, where he makes the final ruling regarding Gentile believers. And we see him still leading the church years later in Acts 21 when the Apostle Paul visits the city.
James the Just is such an incredibly fascinating figure in Christian history. He isn't just an administrator or a pragmatic leader. He is remembered as a deeply, almost intimidatingly revered holy man.
Oh, absolutely.
If we look at the historical profiles recorded by ancient Christian writers like Josephus, whose accounts were later preserved and quoted by the historian Eusebius, the picture we get of James the Just is extraordinary.
His dedication to personal purity and holiness was legendary in antiquity.
Tell us about that lifestyle.
Well, the historical accounts tell us she lived a remarkably strict ascetic lifestyle. Similar to the Nazirite vow in the Old Testament, he drank absolutely no wine or intoxicating liquors. He ate no meat.
Wow.
He refused to wear wool, which came from animals and could be considered less pure. He wore only garments made of pure linen.
Just
Right. He never shaved his head with a razor, he never anointed himself with fragrant oils, and he never bathed for luxury or pleasure. His entire existence was dedicated to a life of radical purity and intercession for the people.
And the physical toll of that intercession is the detail that always sticks with me. It's one of those vivid historical details you just can't easily forget.
The knees, right.
Yes. Josephus records that James spent so much time alone in the temple, kneeling on the hard stone pavements and begging God for the forgiveness of the people's sins, that his knees became heavily calloused. The historian literally wrote that his knees looked like the knees of a camel.
That striking image of camel knees perfectly captures his role and reputation in the city of Jerusalem.
It really does.
He was so highly respected for his extreme piety, his devotion to prayer, and his rigorous dedication to the law of Moses that even the non-Christian Jewish population revered him.
That is saying a lot in that fractured society.
It is. They respectfully called him the Just and referred to him as Oblius, which translates to the bulwark of the people. Because of his extraordinary purity, ancient tradition holds that he was even permitted to enter the holy place in the temple, an honor strictly reserved for the Levitical priesthood.
Amazing.
James was the ultimate bridge builder. He bridged the gap between the traditional, law-observant Jewish community and the emerging, controversial Christian sect in a way that no one else, not even Peter or Paul, could have done.
And we can see that exact same practical, grounded, physically demanding piety in his theology.
Yeah.
When you read the Epistle of James in the New Testament, you see a focus that feels very different from the highly theoretical, grace-focused theology of the Apostle Paul.
There are definitely different emphases, though not contradictory.
Right.
Paul was fighting against legalism, the idea that you can earn your salvation through works, so Paul emphasizes grace. But James the Just was fighting against cheap grace, the idea that you can claim to believe in Jesus but live a life of selfish indulgence.
The classic contrast.
Exactly. James is the one who famously writes, "Faith without works is dead." He says, "Be doers of the word and not hearers only."
For James, true, undefiled religion isn't just about what you believe in your head or what theological creeds you recite. It is about what you do with your hands. He defines pure religion as caring for orphans and widows in their affliction and keeping yourself unstained by the corruption of the world.
If we pull back and connect this to the larger narrative of Acts 12, the contrast is just breathtaking. You have the Jerusalem church now being led by this humble ascetic man with calloused knees, dressed in plain linen, living a life of radical purity, service to the poor, and desperate prayer.
Right.
But what is happening to the man who tried to destroy them? To find out, we have to follow King Herod Agrippa I as he leaves Jerusalem and see where his path leads.
Yes, let's look at the ultimate villain of our story. When daylight finally breaks over Jerusalem and the Roman guards wake up to realize Peter is inexplicably missing from between them, absolute chaos erupts.
Oh, I can't even imagine the panic.
Herod Agrippa is absolutely furious. He interrogates the guards, and according to Roman military law regarding lost prisoners, he has them all executed.
A brutal end for those soldiers.
It is. Following this humiliation, Herod packs up his royal entourage and leaves Judea, traveling down to the coast to reside in his magnificent royal palace in the city of Caesarea.
Now, before we discuss the dramatic climax that happens in Caesarea, it is essential that we quickly map out the Herodian family tree for our listeners.
Oh yes, please do.
Because the title Herod gets passed down through multiple generations in the New Testament, and it is incredibly easy to get them mixed up. It is a very complicated, very violent family dynasty.
It really is a mess. Let's trace the lineage so we know exactly who we're dealing with.
Right. First, at the top of the family tree, you have Herod the Great. He is the grandfather.
Okay.
He is the master builder who constructed the massive temple platform and the retaining walls we discussed earlier. He is also the paranoid king who was visited by the wise men when Jesus was born and who ordered the massacre of the infants in Bethlehem.
So that's the grandfather.
Right. Second, moving down a generation, you have his son, Herod Antipas. This is the uncle of our current king. Antipas ruled over Galilee. He is the one who famously had John the Baptist beheaded at the request of his stepdaughter, and he is the Herod who briefly mocked Jesus during his trials before sending him back to Pontius Pilate.
Okay, that's Antipas.
Third, we come to Herod Agrippa I. This is our current king in Acts 12, the grandson of Herod the Great. He is the one who just executed James the Greater and arrested Peter.
Got it.
And just to complete the historical timeline, there will be a fourth Herod mentioned later in the book of Acts, his son, Herod Agrippa II, who will eventually put the Apostle Paul on trial.
That is extremely helpful context. So our current king, Herod Agrippa I, goes down to the cosmopolitan, pagan-influenced city of Caesarea, and while he is there, enjoying his wealth, a major geopolitical crisis is brewing.
Things are tense.
Very. The people of Tyre and Sidon have somehow managed to anger Herod. Now, Tyre and Sidon are wealthy Phoenician port cities on the coast of modern-day Lebanon. They are incredibly rich from maritime trade and the production of purple dye, but they have a massive vulnerability.
What's that?
They have very little agricultural land.
Ah, and this is where Herod exercises ruthless political leverage. A severe famine is sweeping through the region. Tyre and Sidon rely entirely on the fertile agricultural lands of the Galilee and Judea lands, strictly controlled by Herod, to import their food.
He has them right where he wants them.
Herod knows he has them cornered. He institutes an embargo, essentially starving these wealthy cities into submission.
So, desperate for bread, the leaders of Tyre and Sidon realize they have to appease Herod at any cost. They actually bribe Herod's personal assistant, a man named Blastus, to secure an audience, and they come down to Caesarea to publicly beg for peace.
This geopolitical tension sets the stage for a spectacularly arrogant climax. The book of Acts tells us that on an appointed day, Herod puts on his royal robes, sits on his judgment throne in the amphitheater, and delivers a grand public oration to the desperate people of Tyre and Sidon.
And this brings us back to that silver robe from the intro.
Yes. But here again, the historian Josephus, who was not a Christian and had no theological reason to validate the New Testament, gives us a stunning, corroborating historical detail about this exact event that isn't explicitly found in the biblical text.
This is the detail about his wardrobe, right? The silver garment.
Yes. Josephus records that the royal garment Herod wore that day was not standard fabric. It was a robe woven entirely out of silver thread.
Let me make sure I'm picturing this accurately. A robe made entirely of silver metal. That would be incredibly heavy, not to mention astronomically expensive.
It was a display of unimaginable wealth designed to project divinity. Josephus writes that as Herod stepped out into the open-air theater early in the morning, the sun caught the silver garment, and it shone with such a blinding, terrifying brilliance that a shudder went through the crowd.
Wow.
The people were awestruck by the sheer physical majesty of it, and the desperate crowd from Tyre and Sidon, knowing their entire food supply and their very survival depended on the mercy of this man, decided to flatter him with the ultimate, unforgivable blasphemy.
They start shouting, "This is the voice of a god and not of a man." It is the ultimate political ego trip. He has the military power, he has the wealth to starve entire cities, he is wearing a blinding silver robe, and now the crowds are literally deifying him.
And here is the fatal flaw. He does not stop them. Unlike Peter earlier in Acts, or Paul and Barnabas in Lystra who tear their clothes in horror when people try to worship them, Herod absorbs the praise.
He just takes it in.
He gladly accepts the blasphemy. He refuses to deflect the glory to the one true God. And the text of Acts bluntly states that instantly an angel of the Lord struck him down.
The theological irony is chilling. The exact same spiritual force, the angel of the Lord, who gently tapped Peter on the side to free him from his chains, now strikes Herod Agrippa with a fatal, irreversible blow.
The scriptural account is brief but graphic. It says he was eaten by worms and breathed his last. But again, Josephus provides the extensive historical and medical details of this exact event.
What does he say?
Josephus records that the moment the crowd called him a god, Herod looked up and saw an owl perched on a rope above him, which he took as an omen of doom. Immediately, he was seized by severe, agonizing abdominal pains. He had to be carried out of the theater, and Josephus notes it took 5 excruciating days of internal torture for him to finally die.
5 days.
Yeah. Medical historians who have studied the symptoms described by Josephus often suggest he suffered from a massive intestinal rupture caused by a severe parasitic infection, literally eaten by worms.
The man who believed his own press, who thought he was a god, who wore silver that blinded the eyes of his subjects, is consumed by worms from the inside out. But the most powerful part of this story isn't the gruesome death of a tyrant. It's the verse that immediately follows.
Verse 24.
Yes. As Herod dies in agony, his political machine crumbling around him, the text of Acts 12 leaves us with verse 24. It is the perfect, triumphant summary of this entire historical drama. It says, "But the word of God continued to spread and grow."
That single sentence captures the absolute unstoppable resilience of the early church. They outlasted the very political and military powers that sought to eradicate them, and they did it without raising a sword.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We have walked through the massive 20-story marble courtyards of the Herodian Temple in Jerusalem. We have explored the strict ascetic life of James the Just with his calloused knees. We have sat in the dark, terrifying, maximum security prison cells with Peter. And we have stood in the blinding, arrogant sun of the Roman amphitheater in Caesarea. When you synthesize all of this history, archaeology, and scripture, what is the core spiritual theme for you, the listener, today?
The fundamental lesson for believers today is about faithfulness in a secular culture. Think about the cities we've discussed today, Herodian Jerusalem and Roman Caesarea.
Very intense places.
These were wealthy, cosmopolitan, intensely political, and hedonistically pagan centers of power. They demanded allegiance. And just as the early apostles had to navigate those secular power structures with the gospel, believers today are called to stand firm in truth in the midst of our own secular culture.
It's about recognizing where true power actually resides, isn't it? Because the contrast we've explored today couldn't be starker.
It is a complete inversion of how the world calculates power. Look at King Herod Agrippa. He put his trust entirely in worldly structures. He trusted his political maneuvering with Rome, the economic leverage he had over Tyre and Sidon, the violence of his sword against James, the heavy iron chains binding Peter, his shining silver robes, and the shallow, desperate flattery of crowds calling him a god.
All temporary things.
All of it. But what did the early Christians put their trust in? They didn't form a political action committee. They put their absolute trust in communal prayer, kneeling together in a humble living room.
When we face a modern secular culture that demands we bow to its political idols, or compromise our convictions for a seat at the table of power, or place our hope in wealthy economic structures, we have to remember the lesson of Acts 12. True, lasting power doesn't sit on a silver throne in Caesarea. It doesn't rely on 16 armed guards. True power operates through the quiet, fervent, unified prayers of believers.
And we can take profound courage from the fact that our faith is not a fairy tale. It is supported by real, tangible historical foundations. The opus sectile stones of the Temple Mount, the historical records of Josephus and Seneca, the preserved traditions of the early church fathers regarding the martyrdom of James, they all confirm the harsh, undeniable reality of the world the apostles faced. And more importantly, they confirm the miraculous reality of how God empowered them to overcome it.
If you are enjoying this Apostle series, please subscribe and follow the Holy Land path on this platform so you never miss an episode.
I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to ponder as you go about your week. Consider the paradox of what we just studied. James the Greater was killed by the sword, yet the church only grew stronger. Peter was chained between heavily armed guards behind locked iron doors, yet he walked free without a fight. King Herod Agrippa had all the wealth, political leverage, and military might of the ancient Roman world at his disposal, yet he was struck down in a moment and eaten by worms. If the greatest military and political machinery of the ancient Herodian world could not stop the message of a crucified carpenter, simply because of the fervent prayers of a few commoners, what modern obstacles in your own life are you giving far too much power to?
Until next time, keep walking the ancient paths. Grace and peace to you, and God bless you.